The craftsman, who had previously constructed baby beds, was now digging up his final resting place. Thaddius Cornelius dug the corroded spade into the Arizona desert soil with a lot of effort. Paternal remorse weighed on him with each step, making it seem impossible to bear. The void that had consumed his heart for 3 months was mirrored by the pit, which had almost reached the appropriate depth. The ranch dwelling loomed behind him, vacant and silent, its glass panes as black as the tempest clouds accumulating above. The room that his daughter had entered had not changed at all. Her literature lay open upon her writing desk, while her church garment continued to dangle from the entrance. He found it unbearable to cross the threshold anymore. He couldn't stand witnessing the existence that would never be. The tragic incident continuously replayed in his thoughts like a damaged portrait. The untamed stallion, his daughter's joy transforming into terror, his own powerlessness as he witnessed his sole offspring vanish beneath the animal's hooves. The physician claimed her passing was swift. A father who had failed in his most fundamental duty found no comfort in this. Thad used a trembling palm to wipe perspiration from his forehead. Martha had departed 2 winters prior, claimed by illness. His little girl represented all that remained of his beloved wife, all that remained of any virtue in his existence. Without his precious child, what purpose existed in drawing another breath? The breeze intensified, bringing with it the fragrance of approaching precipitation. Perfect, the tempest would erase whatever traces of Thaddius Cornelius remained, a man who was incapable of safeguarding the most important things. His fellow ranchers would eventually discover him, likely concluding that sorrow had claimed his sanity. Their assumption wouldn't be incorrect. Distant thunder echoed as he hurled another spadeful of earth behind him. The excavation had almost achieved the proper dimensions. Soon, very soon, the anguish would cease. The recollections would end. He would finally be freed from the overwhelming burden of duty he had failed to fulfill. He halted to regain his breath, gazing upward at the darkening heavens. Everything would come to an end within a few hours. His daughter would pardon him, wouldn't she, for choosing to join her rather than enduring the torment of her absence? However, as he lifted the shovel for what he believed would be among his final actions, something captured his attention. Movement appeared on the distant horizon. Silhouettes approached through the heat mirages dancing across the desert landscape. Thad strained his vision against the wind. 5 diminutive figures stumbled toward his land, moving with the frantic desperation of individuals fleeing something horrific. As they approached closer, his blood turned cold. Children, 5 young females, their garments ripped and faces streaked with grime and tears. The eldest appeared no older than 14. The smallest could barely maintain steady footing. They moved like spirits emerging from a terrible dream, constantly glancing backward as if death itself pursued them. In that instant, as Thaddius Cornelius stood beside the edge of his own burial site, grasping a shovel intended to terminate his anguish, he understood his day was about to become far more complex than he had anticipated. The eldest girl arrived at his property boundary first, her dark locks matted with perspiration and despair. When she saw Thad standing beside the deep excavation with a shovel in his hand, and looking like a scarecrow that had given up on its mission, she stopped abruptly. Her eyes widened, not with fear of him, but with understanding of his intentions. "Sir," she called out, her voice fracturing like parched leather, "please don't." Thad's hands shook upon the shovel's handle. Having witnesses, particularly children, was not one of the ways he had envisioned his final moments. Dear God, why must it be children? The 4 smaller ones followed her as if they were lost lambs as she slid through the fence railings with expert ease. Upon closer inspection, he could see their condition was worse than he had initially thought. Their feet were wounded from traversing the desert without shoes. Their lips were split from dehydration. The youngest, a tiny creature with golden curls, swayed unsteadily as if she might faint at any moment. "We won't harm you, sir," the eldest continued, approaching with raised palms. We require assistance. We've been traveling since dawn yesterday." Thad gazed down at the pit he had dug, 6 feet in depth, 3 feet in width. Perfect measurements for a man who had surrendered hope for tomorrow. However, these girls were using everything they had to fight for their futures. "From where have you come?" He heard himself asking, though a part of him preferred not to know, not to get involved, and not to risk failing someone who needed protection again. "Copper Ridge Orphanage," she stated, the words as bitter as serpent's poison. "But we're not returning. Never again." The manner in which she spoke made Thad's stomach contract. He had heard tales about that establishment. Whispers had drifted through town like smoke. Children labored like beasts, beaten for minor transgressions, fed scraps insufficient for a dog. Most people simply turned away their ears. It was easier than becoming involved. The youngest girl swayed once more. This time she collapsed, striking the earth like a grain sack, her tiny form motionless. The eldest rushed to her side, cradling the child's head. "Lucy, Lucy, remain with me." Thad released the shovel. The sound it produced hitting the ground seemed to reverberate across the empty ranch, final as a coffin nail. But rather than descending into his grave, he found himself kneeling beside the unconscious child. She burned with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. Dehydration, exhaustion, perhaps something worse. Without water and shelter, she wouldn't survive another hour in this heat. When did she last have water? Thad asked. Yesterday morning. Same as all of us. He noticed the remaining 3 girls positioned behind their leader. They were all unsteady now, supporting each other through pure determination. Their eyes held a desperate hope that made his chest ache in a different manner than grief. These children were dying here. Now, they were perishing, and he faced a decision. Either postpone his own plans, preserve theirs, or let them die while he died with them. Thunder cracked overhead, closer now. The storm approached whether he lived to witness it or not. But these girls needed a place to sleep. They needed water. They needed someone to protect them from whatever they were escaping. Thaddius Cornelius had failed to rescue his own daughter. The question that would haunt him to the end was, would he not also fail to save these 5? Thad lifted the unconscious girl into his arms. Her small body, weighing no more than a newborn calf. The decision made itself. Death could wait. These children could not. "Follow me," he told the older girl as he was already making his way toward the house. Swiftly, the ranch felt like a graveyard inside. Dust particles danced in the weak light, filtering through dirty windows. He hadn't bothered cleaning since Martha's passing. He hadn't seen the purpose. But now, carrying this dying child, the neglect brought him shame. He placed Lucy on the kitchen table, her fever radiating through his shirt. The eldest girl hovered beside him while the other 3 collapsed onto chairs, their strength finally abandoning them. "What is your name?" As he filled the basin with water, Thad inquired. She said, "Cora May," and she never looked away from Lucy. "Luz is that. Emma, Violet." And the infant rows complete the group. Thad moistened a cloth and pressed it to Lucy's burning forehead. The child's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. Where are we?" Lucy whispered. "Safe," Cora said quickly. "We're safe now." But even as she spoke, Thad saw her glance toward the window. These girls weren't merely running toward somewhere. They were running away from somebody. And whoever was frightened them more than dying in the desert. He brought water cups to each girl, watching them drink with the desperate gratitude of the nearly dead. Rose, the youngest, couldn't have been more than 6. Her hands trembled so severely she could barely hold a cup. "How far behind are they?" Thad inquired quietly. Cora May's face went pale. "Do you know? The look of people being hunted is one I recognize. It was on the faces of soldiers who had been separated from their units during the war." "How far?" "We got maybe a half-day head start. Mister, Garrison took some men and went to town for supplies yesterday. When we heard he was coming back today," she shuddered, "we couldn't wait no more." Thad's jaw tightened. Despite the fact that Silas Garrison was the owner of the orphanage, the term "owned" was not appropriate given what he did to those children. The man was a vulture, taking government money to care for orphans while treating them like slaves. The windows rattled as thunder roared overhead. The storm was almost upon them now, which was both blessing and curse. It would wash away the girls' tracks, but it would also trap them all in this house together. Mr. Cornelius, Thaddius Cornelius. Mr. "Cornelius, we don't expect nothing from you. Let us just relax until the storm passes. Then we'll move on. We won't bring trouble to your door." Thad gave her a serious look. She was trying to be brave, trying to protect the younger ones even though she was just a child herself. The weight of responsibility on her 14-year-old shoulders reminded him painfully of Sarah, who'd always tried to take care of the injured animals they found on the ranch. "Where exactly were you planning to go?" he asked. Cora May's face crumpled for just a moment before she pulled it back together. "I'm not sure. Just away. Somewhere he can't find us." The first fat raindrop splattered against the windows. Soon, this location would become an island in a sea of lightning and mud. And somewhere out there, Silas Garrison and his men were coming. Thad realized he had another choice to make, one that would determine whether he was still the same broken man who'd been digging his grave an hour ago, or something else entirely. The rain began in earnest, drumming against the roof like bullets. As the darkness grew, Thad moved a window and looked out. He could see riders coming from the distance, barely visible through the raindrops. 6 men on horseback, moving with the grim determination of bounty hunters. "They're here," he said quietly. Cora shot to her feet, her face white as bone. "We must flee. We need to. In this storm..." Thad gestured toward the window where lightning split the sky. "You'd be dead before you made it past the fence line." The younger girls began to whimper. Rose started crying, the sound small and broken. She was brought close by Emma, who couldn't be more than 10. "There's a root cellar," Thad said, thinking quickly, "in front of the pantry. You can hide there." "How about you two?" Cora May asked. Thad looked at her, this brave girl who'd been forced to grow up too fast. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd always stood up for creatures that couldn't protect themselves. About Martha, who'd taught him that some fights were worth having even when you couldn't win. "I'll handle Garrison." His yard's mud was splashed by hoofbeats, which became increasingly audible. The cramped cellar, which smelled of old potatoes and earth. Thad helped the girls enter. Lucy was awake now, but still weak, leaning heavily on Violet for support. "No matter what you hear," Thad told them, "don't come out until I come for you. Understood?" Cora May nodded, but her eyes held a question that made his chest tight. She was wondering if he'd betray them, if he'd trade their freedom for his own safety. He was angrier than he had been since Sarah's death, because she had to wonder, and adults who should have protected her had beaten her trust. Heavy boots stomped onto his porch. Thad dragged a bag of flour over the cellar door before closing it, then positioned himself in the kitchen doorway, just as someone pounded on his front door. "Cornelius, open up. We know you're in there." Thad recognized Silas Garrison's voice. Rough as sandpaper and twice as abrasive. He'd met the man a few times in town, always left feeling like he needed a bath afterward. Thad opened the door slowly, keeping his expression neutral. Garrison was standing on the porch with his hat brim dripping with water. Behind him, 5 men with guns and mean expressions crowded under the small overhang. Garrison, hell of a day for a ride. Cornelius, stop the pleasantries. We are following 5 girls who have fled. Seen them come this way about an hour ago. They couldn't see inside the house because Thad was leaning against the door frame. Haven't seen anybody. Been out back all day working. Garrison's eyes narrowed. That's so? Mind if we take a look around? For your own protection. Of course. These girls are dangerous. Might be armed. The lie was so brazen, it almost made Thad laugh. 5 hungry children, armed and dangerous. But he kept his face stone still. Actually, I do mind. This is private property. One of Garrison's men shifted his weight, hand moving closer to his gun. On the porch, tension grew as thick as molasses. Now see, Cornelius, here's the thing, Garrison said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Those girls are legally my responsibility. The territory pays me good money to keep them fed and housed. I look bad when they run away in this manner. Can't imagine why, Thad said dryly. Garrison's face darkened. You got a smart mouth for a man standing alone. Who says I'm the only one? It was a bluff. However, Garrison's sudden uncertainty caused him to glance past Thad and into the house. In that moment of hesitation, Thad realized something that chilled him to the bone. If you were Thaddius, what would you do? Let Garrison search the house and find the girls, or fight 6 armed men to protect children you barely know? In the comments, tell me. I require your opinion on which side, because what Thad decided next would determine whether those 5 girls lived to see another sunrise. Thad chose what he wanted. He stepped back and swung the door wide open. Come on in then. Search as much as you like. Garrison's eyes lit up with triumph, but Thad wasn't finished. As the men filed past him, dripping mud across Martha's clean floors, he added, "But I'll be writing a letter to the territorial governor first thing tomorrow about how you lost 5 children under your care." Garrison froze halfway through the doorway. What's that supposed to mean? Well, if those girls were so dangerous they needed armed men to hunt them down, why weren't you watching them closer? And if they weren't dangerous? Thad let the implication hang in the air like smoke. Now, the other men appeared unsure. They had signed up to collect runaways rather than answer questions about child welfare from territorial authorities. "You're walking on thin ice, Cornelius," Garrison snarled. Thad met his gaze steadily and said, "So are you? The funny thing about thin ice is that it breaks when pressure is applied. And I got a feeling when folks hear about 5 little girls running barefoot through the desert to escape your care, there's going to be plenty of pressure." One of Garrison's men cleared his throat. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Stop talking, Crawford." His boots left muddy footprints on the wooden floors as Garrison pushed deeper into the house. "Find everything. Examine every corner, closet, and room." Thad followed them as they ransacked his home. They overturned furniture in the parlor, tore through Martha's sewing basket, even pulled books from the shelves in Sarah's room. He was compelled to maintain his composure, despite the fact that his rage grew with each violation. They were in the kitchen now, the last room before they discovered the cellar. Thad's heart nearly stopped as Garrison kicked a flour bag, but the man was looking for obvious hiding spots under the table, behind the stove, in the pantry itself. "Nothing here," Crawford said, wiping rain from his face. "Check again," Garrison snapped. "They came this way." The fear is in the air. That's when they heard it. From beneath the floorboards, a soft cough. Lucy's fever was increasing. Like a wolf following a scent, Garrison's head shook. A cruel grin spread across his face as he fixed his gaze on the flour bag. "Well, okay, what do we have here?" He kicked the bag off and opened the cellar door. Though he was outnumbered 6-1, Thad's hand instinctively moved toward the hunting knife on his belt. Even if he took down Garrison, the others would kill him and still get the girls. Garrison gave the order, "Open it." Thad didn't move. I said, "Search the house." "That's not the house."